This video is part of the chapter competition in the course Evolution of Plant Interactions at the Ostrava University. In the previous video, we talked about the limitations of the Tillman resource ratio model and introduced the metapopulation model that relaxes one of these limitations, namely that all individuals have same access to all resources at the same time. In this video, we will see what happens when we relax another assumption, that the habitat is spatially homogeneous. Up until now, our models assumed that resources have a homogeneous distribution in space. But we already saw that this rarely occurs in natural habitats, and resource abundance can vary in space in different ways. Let's see what happens when we incorporate this variation into the model. We saw that when two species are competing for two resources, they can coexist if each of the species is a better competitor for one of the resources, and if the resource supply point of the habitat is such that it doesn't limit any of the two resources at the moment of establishment of the species. What happens if we add a third species that is an even better competitor for resource 1, but the worst competitor for resource 2? If the species competes only with the red one, this is the region in which the supply point supports the coexistence of two species. If it competes with the orange one only, both species can coexist if the resource supply point is in this area. But if the three species co-occur in a homogeneous environment with a given supply point, only two species can remain at equilibrium. Which two species depends on the habitat supply point. That is, unless if there is more than one supply point because the abundance of the resource varies in space. In this case, different resource patches will be able to support different species at equilibrium, and thus multiple species can coexist in the same spatially heterogeneous habitat. Graphically, this translates as an isocline plot that has more than one supply point. In patches where resource 2 is more abundant, there will be coexistence between the yellow and the orange species, and in patches where resource 1 is more abundant, there will be coexistence of the orange and red species. So with only two limiting resources, we can have as many species coexist in one habitat if their abundance is heterogeneous. But what about habitats where only one resource is the limiting factor, such as the Cedar Creek area? Well, two or more species can coexist if we combine the resource abundance with other type of environmental variation, such as temperature or soil pH. Two or more species can coexist if we combine a limiting resource with other types of environmental variation, such as temperature or soil pH. These factors can modify plant growth, but they're not considered resources. Instead, they're abiotic parameters which regulate plant growth and competition. The performance of a species and their competitive ability changes with physical environmental factors. It has been shown that plant competitive ability can change with temperature, for instance. In this study of 4 Veronica species, the growth of plants with and without removed surrounding vegetation was estimated at different temperatures. Points below 0 indicate populations with competition, and points above 0 indicate populations with facilitation, namely a positive effect of high plant density on plant performance. The regression line shows a positive relationship estimated between temperature and competitive effect. At low temperatures, the plants compete with one another, whereas high temperatures, they facilitate each other's existence. So if two species have different competitive abilities at a given temperature, they can coexist even in a habitat with only one limiting resource. The green species here is a better competitor at higher temperatures. It has the lowest possible R star, whereas at same temperatures, the blue species has a much higher R star. So if there are microenvironmental variations in temperature or a temperature gradient along the population, two species can coexist in a habitat even when they compete for a single resource. And in theory, we can have as many competitive species as long as their competitive optima are reached at different temperatures.